Welcome to 20th Century Geek. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. Now, this week I am sat alone. That's right, alone in 20th Century Towers. I was intending to have good old Mike Kennedy with me, but I think work, life and weather have conspired against us, and we haven't been able to get together. So this is going to be a bit of a mini-sode, a mini-pod, a PID maybe. And it's going to be my review of the recent wrestling release movie, Walk Like a Panther. I was going to do this with Mike, and I think we might have to do it again at some point in the future. But I thought I'd just crack on, really, because the film's out, and it's. I'm going to say this right up front. It's worth seeing. It's a good, fun British film. It is very much in the vein of The Full Monty. Okay, but if you don't know what this is, let me give you a bit of a rundown of the plot. It's very simple. So back in the day, back in the 80s, as we covered in the last episode, in Britain there was a show called World of Sport. Now, World of Sport covered a multitude of sports, but a big part of it was British professional wrestling. And this had characters in it like Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks, Kendo Nagasaki, a load of characters that were very British indeed. And by that I mean they looked a bit like your uncle, not quite in shape, but still doing daft things in the ring. Or if Big Daddy was the case, just a very big bloke who had enough charisma to get himself over. This is not your US glamour, pyrotechnics and big music. This is a very different kind of scene. Check it out on YouTube. It's really worth checking out. However, World of Sport was cancelled in 1988. And although it was running for many, many years, there were still young guys coming up through the ranks. And a small group of those were referred to as the Panthers, based in the north of England. And they just sort of like they'd had some of their time, but probably not all of the time. They probably hadn't hit their prime. And hadn't had a chance to sort of really show the world what they could do. And so the rug had been pulled out from under them as they were sort of riding that, just about to hit their height. Jump forward to present day, to 30 years later, and these guys are still living that sort of, a little bit on that legacy, but they've been absorbed into the community. And the community sort of rallies around this group of people that used to be this professional wrestling troupe, really led up by the sort of, I don't want to say the leader, but probably the champ, the Hogan of the group, the Rock, the John Cena, the one that had the charisma and the sort of the way, and he eventually dies. He passes away, and the group decide to raise some money in his memory to have one last shot at doing something. They, during the wake, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but during the guy's wake, there's a short tussle, and some of these wrestlers, now in their 40s and 50s, well, in their 50s, I should say, 50s and 60s, end up in a tussle with a younger person. This gets online, and they really get some attention. And it seems like they can actually make some money for to raise some money for themselves, for the charity, or for just for the community. This then turns a different way when the pub, the Half Nelson, which sort of forms the heart of this community, is going to be closed down. So this wrestling match, the stakes are now increased. Rather than it being just to raise money for the community, it is now about raising money to buy the pub. To make it a community pub. That's the stick. They've got to make this a success to save the pub, what they consider to be the heart of the community. And it goes from there, really. It's very sort of, I would say, atypical. It follows a standard plot. You know, you've got these things that they've got to put this thing. They've got to do this thing. They've got to raise this money. Can they do it? What are they going to do to do it? You know, how do they get back in shape? Who do they get back in the ring? There's always going to be ones that are reluctant. It's very rote, if I'm perfectly honest. It is very predictable. But that doesn't mean it's bad or it's bland. It's much like World of Sport. If World of Sport was the thing you sat down with the family to enjoy it on a sort of a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon, and it was, you had a pot of tea and some biscuits or something. That's what this film is. This isn't a blockbuster. This is never going to beat Black Panther or anything like that. This is a Saturday or a wet Sunday afternoon film that makes you feel good, and that's what's so good about this film. It genuinely makes you feel good. The cast are great. I mean, there's the father-son dynamic between Stephen Graham as Mark Bolton, the younger man who now runs the pub, the Half Nelson, and his dad Dave Johns, who's Trevor Bolton, who was the wrestler, is really interesting. It actually holds some quite sort of interesting facets that probably aren't explored as fully as they would be in other films. But the fact that Trevor, the dad, dedicated so much of his younger days to wrestling in his career, that he actually accepts and acknowledges that he wasn't the dad he should have been to Mark, and really probably let him down in many respects. It's covered. It's like this is a second chance for them. Should he still do it? But the rest of the cast are great. This is one of those casts where you can just see that they get on and they understand the joke. They understand the ridiculousness of this situation. You've got Julian Sands, a guy, a relatively good-looking guy in his late 40s, and that, playing a character called Sweet Cheeks. It's that level of ridiculousness. But I'm going to give real props to Robbie G, who plays a character who plays a black trans, well, he's black, but he plays a black trans wrestler, which is fantastic in itself, a fantastic character, really well portrayed. But it also adheres to what I would consider to be the casual racism of the 80s that was a bit of a wink and a nudge and was probably acceptable in those days, playing a character called Zulu Dawn. And I was gobsmacked to see that they even allowed this, but it was amazing to see that, there would have been characters called things like Zulu Dawn. You'd have got, there would have been these pale, pasty white guys called Big Daddy or whatever, and then, or even Mick McManus. They just have had a standard name, and then when the sort of like the exotic black athlete comes in that actually looks cut and athletic, and they give him a name like Zulu Dawn. It's just standard. It's part of the course. It's the way things went. But to have that actually played out and it to be seen as not as a joke, but acknowledged as it shouldn't have been that way. But it's he is fabulous in this. Robbie G is fabulous. It's fantastic. The other one I've really got to give big props to is Chris Fairbank, who plays a character called Leslie Beck, who is the villain. Now, when I say the villain, he's not the villain of the piece. He's not like, the person trying to close the pub. That goes to somebody else. He plays the villain of the wrestling troupe. And that's a really, really key role of a wrestling entertainment. You can have two good guys wrestle, in a specific way. And either one can go over or either one can win, and it'll be good. The crowd will be engaged. If they're good, they can get the crowd engaged. But nothing, and I mean nothing, gets a crowd going more than a villain, like a good villain. I mean, if you've been to a pantomime, you know what I mean. It's always fun to cheer for Peter Pan, but we love to boo and hiss at Captain Hook, and you need that. And this guy is fantastic. I love his gimmick to the extent that I would, if I was to go back, I would take some of the gimmick in it. The guy's not young. I mean, this guy's in his late 60s, I think. Mid to late 60s, and he takes some hits, and we'll get onto that in a minute as well, but fair play to him. And they build a legend around this guy before you even meet him, and he is fantastic. He plays the part fantastically. So I would say that he was one of my favourite parts. Chris Fairbanks is fantastic as Leslie Beck, and the story will say that when they give him the legend of bringing a Shetland pony into the ring just to punch it in the face to make the kids cry, it sounds ludicrous, it sounds vile. It would have probably happened in 70s and 80s wrestling in the UK without a shadow of a doubt. I can imagine Harley Race doing that kind of thing in the States, or Roddy Piper, something like that. Anyway, so this troupe, they work together. The dynamics in this are fantastic, and it really, really works. So I've got to give credit to all of these guys for making me want to support this group. Because the fact of the matter is, the story in itself is really quite, let's say, rote and a little bit daft. Like, the heart of the town in 2018, the heart of the village being the pub, it feels outdated a little bit. If it was a concept in itself, but the fact they've built this around it makes it so much more entertaining. What I would say is this originally was going to be a sitcom. And there are parts of this that you can just tell don't quite feel movie level or big enough to be in the film. The jokes feel very TV, or they feel a bit flat in many respects. So there are parts that probably could have done with a bit of more polish. But where the comedy's involved, again, like some of the characters really do play up the parts, and really do, they nail it. They see that these aren't serious characters. It's a daft film. I'd say, again, another one to call out is Steve Furst as Popty Wilson Jr. as the sort of like the promoter. And to talk about promoters in this country, in any country, I small booking promoters, they will seriously try and take you for everything you've got. And he's exactly that. He is that. He's just a sort of he's not snidey. He's not horrible. He's almost like a small-time con man. He'll get you to do what he needs you to do to raise the money, and then he'll take the money. He's that kind of person, but he'll make you believe that it's all important. So really, as a film, is it a good film? Yeah, it's enjoyable. If at any point you have been involved in the British wrestling scene, this film is worth a watch. It's a really, really good film. If you enjoy films like The Full Monty, I'd even say like Brassed Off, that sort of level of British comedy, you'll enjoy this. It's not daft. Without being bad, like your nan's going to love this. Like you can watch this in front of your nan and it's not going to be offensive. It's good fun. It's good fun. And I'm hoping that this isn't going to storm the cinema screens, but I'm hoping it'll find a home on streaming and on DVD, because it's really, really worth a watch. So that was just a quick review, really. My thoughts on it. One couple of things I would say is the main event of the film and the sort of the third act is the wrestling show that they decide to put on to obviously save the pub. Whoever filmed this, the cinematographer and the editor in this, deserve a massive pat on the back, because they take something which is clearly it's staged in and of itself, but then to have actors do it and to make them look as quick and as athletic, and for the hits to look as good as they do in many of these cuts and these scenes, is so well done. The camera placing is fantastic. The editing is really good. It's a treat to watch. I mean, it got me going. I was like, these look like they're doing some legit moves, and I'm sure they did. In fact, I know they did from conversations and from other reviews. They do some of the moves, but the way it's been edited gives it that extra nudge. So some of it might feel like a bit like gentle comedy, but that end is all in. I was all in for it by that, and that's what's so good about this film is it starts off gentle and it rolls and it rolls and it rolls, and by the time you get to the end, I was all in on this group. I wanted them to win. I was on their side. Cracking is what it was. It was a cracking British film, and fully enjoyed it. Now, bit of a treat, because I said this is just a bit of a mini pod. Not only are you going to hear me rambling about this film, so I apologise for my ramblings, but I also had the opportunity to interview and to talk about the film with actor and comedian Steve Furst, who plays Popsy Wilson Jr., about his experience on the film, about filming it with Dan Kadan, and he was a part of the original cast in 2010, 2012, when this was going to be a sitcom. So it was fascinating to talk to him about this film. So go, check it out, have a listen to the interview, and I'll see you after the interview. Well, first off, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate you taking the time to chat to me about the film.
No problem.
So really, because I've been watching a lot of. I'm doing a whole load of stuff on 80s wrestling, so I've been watching a lot of World of Sport and the American style as well. But World of Sport is quintessentially British in its style and its presentation. Was it part of your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was weird because I grew up in London, but it always was a glimpse into parts of the country that I'd only really ever heard of. Civic halls in Huddersfield or Hull or Grimsby or wherever, and it just seemed like another world completely removed from my reality.
Yeah.
But of course, it was still very much quintessentially, as you said, quintessentially English, and it just felt. Like you say, I've always loved stuff that's a bit low rent and a little bit shabby. And even at that age, I knew that it was just that, and I loved it. It never seemed glamorous to me, particularly, because the audience were anything but glamorous.
Yes, I mean, it's like you say, it was all the social clubs and the grannies beating them with their handbags and all that kind of thing. It's
exactly. It wasn't like a boxing, like a high-end boxing match, which always had people in bow ties at the front, and all the great and the good and showbiz stars ringside. It was none of that. So I felt that, like the darts, it was for everybody.
Yeah. The thing about the other difference I always find with the British, when you're watching it, is even like the villains or the more Healy characters and the big blue-eyed faces, none of it was ever taken wholly seriously. It was always tongue in cheek.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the kind of British way. Is it always laughs at itself, and the fact that a lot of them were athletes, and it started as as an athletic pursuit. But then you did have your Haystacks and your Big Daddies, and which were anything but. So it seemed attainable. It seemed that anyone could do it. It wasn't prohibitive, and it didn't like the Americans took it to another level in terms of prowess of physical form.
That's it, yeah.
And so then it seemed light years away from reality. But, I like that fact that not that I ever really wanted to get to the ring, but you could if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean that's it. A friend of mine, when we were talking about this the other night, he actually said, the Americans, with all the colourful lycra and the pyrotechnics and the big music, they turned it into a superhero show, whilst the British one was like watching your mad uncle in his mate in the ring. But
exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
And also, that they all had normal jobs.
Yes. This was
that come Monday morning, and I know that they were playing to millions of people on a Saturday afternoon, and then they're having to clean windows or fix drainage on a Monday morning, which was cruel on the one hand, but also quite beautiful on the other hand.
Yeah, like you said, these were normal guys. These were they weren't 7 days in the gym. They were, like you said, they had a job. They got families to support and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the real villains were often the promoters and the people that took the money and didn't, didn't portion it out as it should have been. Always felt like that it was a bit of them and us.
Yeah.
So,
that still goes on. Yeah. I mean, I've experienced sort of some of that with lots of things. It's always like the booker or the promoter is always taking slightly more than they suggest they're ever taking. So
always, but it's the unseen expenses, isn't it?
Yes, that's it.
We've got overheads. We've got posters and bunting doesn't come cheap. You bastard.
Yeah. See, no, so it's, to watch all that has been fantastic, and then to watch Walk Like a Panther it was like stepping back into it. It's a brilliant film. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Me and Mike, my mate who co-host on the podcast, really enjoyed it. And what I didn't know until I started looking into it to talk to you is it was originally pitched as a sitcom back in 2011.
Well, it was, and we filmed it.
Okay.
We filmed an episode. We filmed half hour with some of the same cast, and we felt that when we were making it, that it was, this should be a film. And for various reasons, for boring political reasons, it was never picked up.
Yeah.
But but Channel 4 loved it, Sky loved it, so we knew that there was a story here, and a story with some great characters. And Dan, who wrote and directed it, wanted it, to do. It was a story about people, and it was a story about community,
Yeah.
and having known wrestlers, you know that the community is still very tight.
Yeah, it feels again like it's a British story. It centres around a local community, a small community. It's got a central point like the pub and that sort of thing. So it really does it hit home. For me and Mike, really, in many ways.
Good. I think it's going to be one of those films that people, because the British haven't liked it, but I think it's going to be one of those films that over the next year people will discover, and it speaks to people that aren't necessarily, they don't over intellectualize it. It's got a film with a heart.
Yes.
And those films can often take a little while longer to hit word of mouth.
Yeah. And that's it. And that's why I thought, that's why I want to get it out on the podcast as well to talk about it, because I do think it's a film worth seeing, and say get that word out there. The story, though, so the concept that you had in 2011 and you filmed then, as much of it changed that when it translated to the film, it being a different format and stuff?
Well, the main change was the hook being the pub, and being the pub being threatened with closure. So there was a reason for them, because the sitcom pilot episode ended with them getting in the coach and going off to wrestle. But there didn't seem to be there didn't seem to be a point to them doing that. Other than they wanted to get back together and on a ginger frost. So with this, it was like, no, there's a reason, there's a jeopardy, they need to get the money in order to buy back the pub. And that, at a time, since 2011, more and more pubs closing down, and it seemed to be more and more current in that way.
No, it does. It provides a real heart to the film. That's the centre of the film. It's the motivator, and I think that's the thing that people anchored to. One thing there's a note. So in the film, you are Popsy Junior. I noticed on the casting list for the sitcom, then you were Popsy. So is the Junior sort of a bit of a nod to the previous incarnation? Yeah.
Well, no. It's more that he's. There's a mention. It's only really mentioned. And it was mentioned in the sitcom as well, but that your dad, my dad had something to do with it. So it was the idea that, he's been around. They don't really trust him. They certainly didn't trust his dad. He was one of those promoters that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And that I had something to do with the end or the end of their days, their glory days. And of course, that was out of Popsy's control. It was all due to world of sport finishing and the Americans taking over, really. And yet, I think he feels there's the chance to redeem himself and the name, or the Wilson name, if you like, and actually go, I'm not as bad as you might think I am. So he's one of those characters that you don't quite trust at the beginning, but you sort of warm to because his heart's in the right place, really. And he's also got this personal relationship with Bourne as well.
Yes.
Again, not really, it's not laboured, but there's definitely something there. And it gives it another little human touch.
No, it did. I mean, the thing I liked about the character was, you're right, you warmed to him But he's always play, or you always play him as I would almost imagine, like an 80s manager to be. You know, that sort of like, yeah, he's helping them out, but he's always got his slightly own agenda. So,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and I always quite like that. That even at the very end, when you sort of like, you know, you have the money to give back to Mark, and then he's about to make it, and you're like, well, I'll need this then. And it's that thing, like, you know, I'm always going to have my hand in my pocket.
Interestingly, there was a previous draft of the script that he actually does a runner. You know, that you hear him calling up and booking a holiday, and you see the money by his side in his Range Rover, which is a really shitty 1970s Range Rover.
Right.
And it's like, and Dan felt that it just felt too cruel.
Yeah.
He felt that, you know, he wouldn't do that. He'd kind of come round and he'd go, you know what, let's, you know, he's on their side.
That's it. He'd become one of the Panthers, hadn't he? I mean, much like, you know, like I say, that's the thing about this film. It is a community film. Like, even like Ricky Rickson ends up becoming part of the group sort of thing. But yeah, no, the characters are great. I mean, some of the names, were they all done by Dan Cadden, or was it?
To be honest, I would say they were. It was, you know, some of the names existed before. The Dixon, you know, 8 years ago, the Dixons were there.
Yeah.
Ginger Frost was there. Zulu Dawn as a name was there. So yeah, the names have been around for a while. Actually, I'd say nearly all of them. Laura, Sweet Cheeks, and they all felt a little. Again, they all felt a little bit low rent as well. You know, Sweet Cheeks is a pretty. You know, it's not ideas above the station with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's still. You know, it's still very British. It's not the Rock or the Hulk or that. You know, it's there's a shabbiness to it which I quite like.
Well, the thing is, one of the things, you know, especially talking about the guys, the gimmicks and the characters they have. You know, I worked on the British wrestling scene, the independent scene for quite a few years, sort of like 2003 to about 2010, and I know all these people. I know them.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like I've met those people on the independent circuit, and you see watching it, you're like, I know a Sweet Cheeks, I know a Zulu Dawn, I know a Gladiator sort of thing. I know all those people. I'm one of them, to be fair. You know, you can see, you go, okay, I can see that. Which was fantastic. But I was at the cat that for the third act for the show, and for some of the training, like the guys take some pretty good looking bumps. You know, what did they do I'm assuming there was training.
They were, and it was. There were a couple of guys training them, and it was hard for them, you know. I mean, because they didn't have weeks of training. It's probably about a week, and a couple of them really rose to the challenge. And the one who found it the most difficult was Chris Fairbank, who plays Leslie Beck.
Yeah.
And he nearly, you know, I mean, that day of filming, he was a broken man at the end of it. And
yeah.
I was genuinely worried about him because, you know, he's not fit. He's an actor. And the way it's edited, I was like, sweet Jesus, they've made him look like a giant, you know?
Yes.
But of course, he's still, you know, there are still moves that he had to replicate from training in the ring, and he did it. You know, he gave his all, and you can't. You know what it's like. If you can't make it look like it, then those last bouts will just the film will die.
Oh yeah.
And I think, and I hope, and I know from my own viewing of it, that they pull it off beautifully. You know. Oh,
they really do. Like I say, the editing is fantastic, but like in others, there's some of the moves are really sweet. I mean, there's some real. Really well sort of like placed bumps, and I was thinking, like I say, these, you know, if they haven't had weeks or even months of training, the body acclimatizes to it when you're taking the bumps, but if you're not used to it, those hurt. Those can really hurt.
Yeah. And also bear in mind, because you know it's about when you've got to film from 5-6 angles, you've got to do it again, and you know by the last one, you know, it's fuck, here we go again. And you could, you know, with some of them, they were really suffering. But the crowd, the rented crowd that we had, for 4 days we shot in Huddersfield Town Hall, they were tireless in their enthusiasm for getting behind them.
Yeah.
And so once the initial flourish and the wow, they're amazing. You rely on them to still pull their enthusiasm out the bag, and they really did. And that, of course, fuels our actors into delivering, which was something, I have to say. Yeah.
Well, it is definitely one of those things that, again, having done it and been there, it's you can get through if the crowd's up and you get that instant gratification from it. Like you said, you'll battle through and you'll love it, and then you get backstage and it hurts.
Isn't it? Really?
It is. It really is. It doesn't hurt till the next day when you get up and you've got to go to work and you say, "Oh,
there
geez."
you go. Well, actually interesting. Stevie Graham was the first to get injured.
Oh, really?
In training, and because he thought, he was the only one going to the gym regularly. And Sod's Law, he was the one that had the first twist to the ankle, and it was pretty bad. And then Stevie, who plays Glenn Higgins, he also had a bit of an injury. So there was a worry that it's often the more innocuous moves where you think you're going to be fine are actually the ones that catch you off guard.
Yeah. Well, it shows the commitment. They committed to the role. So if you're taking your bumps, you're taking your hits, then it's going to look good.
Yeah. Good.
No, fantastic. It's been great talking to you about the film, and I've got to say I loved it. I really enjoyed it, and
Thank you.
And
spread the word.
We will be. No, we will be.
And the nice thing is, of course, these films, they're a few weeks in cinema, but they then exist on Sky Movies or whatever, or of course on download, and then we're really hoping that as word will spread, thanks to people like you over the next few months, that this film will kind of gather a bit of a groundswell of grassroots interest in, and the wrestling, the wrestling fraternity are very behind it. And I think the wrestling fraternity in America are also very behind it. Because they do have a real respect for where it came from,
Oh, they do. Yeah.
Very supportive. So
the indie scene over here and in the US, they really are passionate, and if they love something, they'll love it and they'll give it all their all. Sure. So I'm hoping they'll find legs. Before we sort of sign off, though, is there anything else you want to plug or throw any awareness out there for?
Not really. I'm always just plugging away doing, on my website, stevefurst.com, and I've got my other characters. I've got my alter ego, Lenny Beige, who's been going around for 25 years. And in fact, that was how I met Dan, because I was promoting wrestling in London, and I got to the ring a couple of times as Lenny, in a kind of jokey way.
Yeah.
But so I'm still plugging away with him, and always doing live shows, and I'm trying to book a tour where I'm doing a Neil Diamond tribute as well this year. So that's been going down very well last year.
Thank you, Steve. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Have a good evening, mate. Cheers. Well, there we go. The wonderful Steve Furst, taking the time out of his day to talk to us about Walk Like a Panther. Fantastic. Thanks again, Steve. Really appreciate it. So, just going around it all again, I really do recommend you see this film. It's a great laugh. Take the family, take your granny, take your granddad. Good fun. So, what's coming next for 20th Century Geek? So, I think we've overcome the weather and everything else that's gone on. And I've got some interesting things in the pipeline. So, not really sure what the next episode's going to be, but I'll let you know when I know. But in April, it's Superman month. It's Superman's 80th birthday. They've got 1,000 issues of Action Comics coming out. So, we are going to have some special episodes dedicated to Superman and what he means to people. And it's really good. I think it's going to be really important and it's going to be fascinating. So, I look forward to getting those out and getting some feedback on those. In the meantime, let me know what you think. Come back and let me know how things are going on your side. Email me 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter @20thcenturygeek. Or on Facebook under 20th Century Geek. On Tumblr, 20th Century Geek. All the geeks everywhere. Instagram, always putting out some pics and stuff out there. But more importantly, help us keep the lights on at 20th Century Towers. Please, we always want to keep the show getting stronger and stronger. So find us on Patreon and donate whatever you can. Every penny helps. Every donation, every subscriber, and check out the rewards. The big ones are going to be a movie review every month. So every month we're going to be reviewing a film and doing a subscribers only movie review, which I think is going to be very special. So until the next show, have a great time, and I'll see you soon.